Hello everyone, welcome to AgilePoint NX product briefing for 2021. Over the next couple of hours, I'm going to walk you through some of the core features of AgilePoint NX platform, also covering some of the new features which were added as part of AgilePoint NX version 8.0, which was a major release which took place a couple of months back. It was a user experience release where the entire user experience of the AgilePoint portal was revamped. Before I start building the demo, I'm going to talk about the environment I'm going to use for today's environment. I'm going to use AgilePoint Trial Edition, which is hosted in AWS. It has two virtual machines and network load balancing, and it uses Microsoft SQL Server 2019 as a database. Now, AgilePoint is also available for on-premises as well as private cloud environments, but for today, I'm going to use the hosted environment. So as I said, this is a hosted multi-tenant environment where two virtual machines are serving multiple tenants. However, each tenant still gets their own isolated database. That means this is GDPR compliant and customer's data is kept entirely separate from each other, and customer owns the data. They can delete the data, they can report against the data, they can download it as well. In today's demo, I'm going to build an application which integrates with a whole lot of applications out there. So it connects to AgilePoint data entity for storing customer and order information, Office 365 for storing documents as well as product catalog, PayPal for payment processing, Salesforce for product inventory management, Amazon machine learning for AI-driven process routing, Microsoft Cognitive Services for natural language processing. I'm going to use some sentiment analysis over here. UiPath for RPA processing, SQL Server for reporting, and Google Maps for location services. So I'm going to build a customer order management scenario over here. Now what I've done is I'm going to start from a blank environment. What I've done over here is I've sent myself an invitation to AgilePoint trial environment. I'm going to copy it over and paste it in a private window. So the first thing you see is it is asking me to pick the primary authentication provider. AgilePoint supports a concept of bring your own identity. So you see all the commonly known identity providers listed over here: Salesforce, Azure Active Directory, G Suite. But we also support the likes of Okta, Ping Federate, SiteMinder, Oracle Access Management, AWS Cognito Services, etc. For a customer who does not have any of these services available, we do provide you an inbuilt identity provider called AgilePoint ID, which I'm going to use in today's demo. I'm going to pick a username for my tenant administrator, password, job title, company name. I'm going to just use the same name as the username for now. Contact number, and click register. Now what happens at this point of time is it starts spinning up a new tenant. Behind the scene, it spins up new services as well as it is going to provision some of the databases. Now this process takes around 35 to 40 seconds. And in the meantime, I'm going to walk you through the scenario I'm going to build. So I'm going to build a furniture store where customers can come and place an order, or an order can be placed on behalf of the customer as well. So it can be a new customer, and if it is a new customer, first the customer's profile has to be set up in the customer table, and then the order should be inserted into the order table once the payment has been authorized. However, it can be an existing customer, and in that case, customer's information should be pre-populated on the form. Customer can still update, say, email ID or phone number, and then the order should be processed based on the authorization rule. I'm also going to have if it is an existing customer, I'm going to show a read-only view of his order history so that you can see what orders have been placed in past. Now, for today, I'm going to use SharePoint as my product catalog. So you can see here is the product catalog in a SharePoint list, and Salesforce as a product inventory. So you can see here are the various products and here are the inventory levels. Entertainment system and showcase, they are marked as 0 over here. So I'm going to go back to this environment now. So as you can see, the environment is now ready. It is going to redirect me to AgilePoint portal in next few seconds. It's setting up the tenant for first time use right now. It takes around 10 more seconds and then we should be good to go. So it's saying that it is setting up the portal for first time use. And then it redirects me to the home page of the portal. Now, one thing you see over here is that it shows me some quick start templates, video tutorials over here. I'm going to just say no thanks. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first go to my user profile and change my display name. I can add an icon over here or an image for my user profile. Now, first we are going to look at how the home page looks like. So this is a vanilla home page which comes out of the box, and later on in the demo you are going to see how this changes as I start building the application. Before we start building the application, let's look at some of the key features available in the product. So Work Center is a module which is meant for end users. This is where your end users submit their tasks, new requests, consume reports, that kind of a thing. Manage Center is for administrators and application owners to manage the applications, their runtime, their security, governance, create connections to various systems, manage system performance, etc. App Builder, this is where we are going to spend most of the time today, is used by application designers to build the application. Page Builder, as I mentioned, right now it comes with vanilla home screen, but with Page Builder you can completely rebrand the look and feel of the portal as per your company branding guidelines. Analytics Center, it is used for creating reports and dashboards. We are going to do that today. Collaborate is for having discussion with your team members. There's an app store. You can download some quick start app templates like COVID-19 applications from here to get started. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to settings module first to personalize the tenant as per my company branding guidelines. So I'm going to say company name is Waxo. I'm going to upload a logo for my company. So I'm going to go to a folder over here. I'm going to say change it to my company's logo. So now you can see the logo got updated. I also want to change the illustration image over here. I'm going to go ahead and upload an illustration image. So that got updated over here as well. I'm going to go ahead and say save. And the effect of this is if I open it in a different tab, the home page in a different tab, now you can see my logo and my illustration got changed. I can change other things as well. I'm going to leave that for now. I can personalize my work center settings, manage center settings. There's a whole lot of things which you can personalize. For example, if I go to process designer, I can say enable BPMN properties. Or if I go to say form designer over here, I can enable things like performance monitoring. Or if I am one of those companies who wants to enforce global branding across all my applications, I can upload a global CSS which can be automatically inherited by all my applications. I can go to Analytics Center and set some settings over there. We are going to come back to this later. I'm going to go to tenant settings. It shows me all the important URLs. I'm going to go to settings over here and enable mobile access, so I have complete control over whether my portal is exposed to mobile devices or not. I'm going to go back to admin settings. So if you remember, I signed up using AgilePoint ID, so that's what you are seeing in the enabled authentication. But in today's landscape, most customers have multiple authentication providers, so you can enable secondary authentication providers as well. So if I switch to one of my other environments over here, you can see I have multiple authentication providers, multiple Salesforce authentication providers, Windows Azure Active Directory authentication providers enabled. So you can have multiple of these enabled. Also, you can specify the synchronization rule. So in this case, I have said auto sync user profile after successful login. So if your tenant administrator has allowed use of these external authentication providers and the users are logging in using your organization IDs, their profiles can be auto synchronized with AgilePoint. I'm going to go back to my environment. I'm going to disable auto synchronization for now, and I'm going to say I'm going to do it in manually. I can, even for manually, I can download an Excel sheet. I can provide my list of users and upload it and create it in bulk, or I can do it manually. So I'm going to do it manually in this case. I'm going to open Manage Center, which is the admin module. I have to provision only 2 users, so I'll do it manually. I'm going to say this user is called developer. His email address is this. And for manager, I'm going to select myself as his manager. I'm going to assign him some access rights. Out of the box, you get 4 roles created automatically. You can create as many custom roles as you wanted. I'm going to assign him to application designer role. I'm going to add one more user. I'm going to call him QA user. Same email ID. I'm going to assign myself as the manager and go ahead and create it, but I'm going to leave this user in the bare minimum access rights. So end user access rights, no application designer rights. Click finish. Now if I switch back to my email over here and do a refresh, I have received 2 emails because I specified same email ID for both. I'm going to copy this credential over, go to another private browser window and type it. I'm going to select this password as well. Click sign in. Now as you can see, because he was put in a user with least privileges, he's seeing limited set of menu options at the top. Just the end user area like work center and collaborate. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my demo environment. Now before I start building my application, one thing which I wanted to specify is that if you go to access controls and roles, AgilePoint provides a very granular access control system. It has a layered security model. So I'm going to first show you the global level security. So at a platform level, you can control things like what admin options that the user has, like adding a user, deleting a user, defining external connections. At an app runtime level, can he initiate a process or cancel a process or cancel a task or reassign it? What modules people belonging to this role would see in the top menu? If they have been given app designer permissions, can they create a process or can they check in and check out files on behalf of other people? Can they manage settings of any of the modules? On the analytics, what kind of roles do they have on the analytics center? So you can specify these. You can create as many roles as you wanted from here. So it provides you a very granular access control. There are 75 permissions which you can control. Now this is at a server level. Now later on you are going to see me controlling permissions at application level, data level, page level, as well as report level. So what I'm going to do is, since I have to connect to a lot of systems, I'm going to go to App Builder, Global Access Tokens. Now this is where I can create a connection to external systems. A connection can be defined globally and shared across applications, or I can define it at an application level and limit it to the scope of the application. AgilePoint does support connections with 70 plus different systems, so you can create connections to all of those. I'm going to connect to, say for example, Salesforce. If you go in over here, it handles all the advanced authentication mechanisms. So as you are probably aware, Salesforce supports OAuth 2 authentication, so client ID, client secret, generate an OAuth 2 token, but you also get advanced security features like auto recycle my OAuth 2 token every 15 minutes, for example, from a security perspective. For today's demo, I'm going to import a list of tokens for all the systems I'm going to connect to. Click import over here. So it creates all those tokens for me. So if I had created these in my dev environment and I'm moving it to a production environment, it's just a point and click thing. Okay. So with this, I'm now ready to start building my application. So I'm going to go to App Builder. Now, right now you see a blank canvas over here. I could have gone to the App Store and downloaded some quick start templates from there, like COVID-19 apps, and get started. However, I'm going to start from scratch. Now, before I do that, AgilePoint is your uniform application builder for your organization, so it can help build all sorts of applications. Few years back, AgilePoint was known more for process-centric applications, but that story has changed in the last 3-4 years, where now we can obviously create process-centric applications, but we can also create data in, data out kind of applications with no process at all. We can create AI applications, chatbot applications, mobile applications, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and start creating an application. Now, the first question people usually have is, where is the application data going to reside? AgilePoint supports multiple approaches for this. So I can go for an application first approach where I start designing an application. And as I'm designing an application, my data source is defined on the fly. Or I can select a data first approach where I can define my data source first. I'm going to use a data first approach today. I'm going to go to data entities. This is our browser-based entity designer. It is an optional component, and you are going to see why I say it is optional. So for business users who are not familiar with any of the SQL tools, they can just use the browser to start designing their entity. I'm going to design an entity, for example, called demo over here. Give it a unique record identifier called name. Its type is text. And I can enable some of the other things like import, export of entity from one environment to another, enable analytics. I'm going to go ahead and say create entity. So it created some system fields and a field called name. I can go and create additional fields over here. So it presents me a list of field types. I'm going to say, for example, date. I'm going to create a field called date of birth, specify any rules, and go ahead and click save. So it just added a new field type with a new data classification over there. So I'm building my data dictionary in a way. Now that was if I'm building from scratch. But oftentimes business users have data in an Excel sheet, and for that matter, even professional developers. They might have got a dump of data from, say, an external system. So if you have that kind of a thing, so here is an example. I do have an Excel sheet with a list of records. I'm going to just go to import entity. We do support a whole bunch of record types. I'm going to say import this data from this Excel. It parses out data. It tells me here are the various data types it figured out. Some of them are date, numeric, decimals. I'm going to point this one to email and this one to phone. And then I'm going to say, go ahead, create this entity. The primary record identifier would be process instance ID column. And here is the display name over here. I'm going to assign it to a particular category and click import. So that's the second way of creating your entity. So as you can see, my entity got created. If I go to the data tab, it has all the data in there. Now, what if I created these in my development environment and I'm moving it to production? You can obviously automate it as well, or you can do just over here, import entity. Go to an entity over here. I'm going to import an entity called customer. Click import. So as you can see, it created the columns, and there are 3 records in here: John Smith, Steve Smith, and David Warner. I'm going to go back and import a child entity called order. And if you see, it created order specific fields. If I go to the relationship tab, it created a relationship. It says it is related to customer entity using customer ID column. I can add more relationships if I wanted. There are 3 orders which are in there right now. It also lets you control permission at a data level. So previously you saw at a global level. Now I'm controlling things at a data level. I can specify who can design this entity, who can read, edit, create or delete records out of this entity, and even who can report against these records. You can precisely control that. Now, as I'm building this entity, this is a shared data source. It would be used across multiple applications perhaps. So it tells me which all applications are using this particular entity. And at the same time, if I go to audit trail and if I have enabled it, it shows me which user edited what record and what value was changed. Now, if I'm one of the admin users and I want to manage these entities in bulk, I have that UI as well. So you can manage this across entities for a particular user or a role or a group. Now, with that out of the way, I'm going to go back to App Builder. And I'm going to start designing my application. I'm going to go ahead and click on Add an App. Now, this experience has been totally revamped for more of business user perspective. It asks you a series of questions. So first it is asking you, what kind of an application do I want to build? Is it a form-based application with no process at all? In my case, I am going to build process-based application today. I'm going to call it COM. AgilePoint is completely localized in 15 plus different languages. So you can select a language of your choice for design time. Remember, this is the design time language. Runtime language can be in any language of your choice. I'm going to stick to default, which is English in my case. I'm going to say belongs to customer service category. Because I said this is a process-driven application, it would ask me to provide the name of my first process model. And how is it going to be triggered? It can be triggered based on an eForm, which is an inbuilt form designer. External forms like ASP.NET, JSP, PHP, Angular, React kind of thing. Messages or events like incoming email, or a file gets dropped to a file system, or an event occurs in blockchain, that kind of events which are all out of the box. System integration, it can be an orchestration style process with no human interaction. Parent-child process, you are going to see later in my demo, I'm going to use this. And it can listen to external events like an item got created in SharePoint or Salesforce, etc. I'm going to use eForm for today. I'm going to add a couple of swim lanes, give it a theme. Click next. Next, it asks me the primary data store for my application. Now, if I would have selected blank, I would have used the application first approach where it would have started generating a data source as I'm dragging and dropping controls. But I'm going to use data entity as my data source for today's application. However, remember I mentioned data entity is an optional component. So we kept it quite flexible and took an approach which is different from other vendors. In other vendors, they force you to use their entity structure. We kept it optional. So if you had an existing SQL Server, MySQL or Oracle kind of a table, you can use that to store the data. If you have entities defined in Salesforce or list or libraries in SharePoint, or for that matter, if you have an Excel sheet which is kept in, say, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive kind of a repository, you can use that as a data store, and data directly goes and sits there when you are submitting the form. I'm going to use data entity today. I'm going to give that a name. I'll say connect to customer entity. I can specify my synchronization rules. So I can say auto sync data with data entity as soon as the form is submitted, or I want to keep a local copy. I'll use for auto sync in this case. Which fields I want to be exposed to my application. If there are any child tables I want to bring in my application, so I'm going to say customers can have orders. Next, it asks me, do I want to upload any miscellaneous stuff like create app level access tokens, an integration with a document repository, any style sheets or JavaScript which I want to upload, create roles or groups for a particular application, upload any images. I'm going to go with default for now. Next, it asks me how do I want to secure my application. So I'm going to say, remember I created a user called developer earlier. I'm going to add him to the application designer role for this application. I'm going to leave rest of it as default. Now it takes all of that information and starts configuring my application. And because it's a process centric application, it is going to put me in a process designer. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename these swim lanes. So the first swim lane is going to handle the application submission or order submission, and second one would be for escalation. Now, before I start building this, if I go to form data over here, you can see it is a hybrid data model. So as I'm going to drag and drop form controls, it will have some form only controls, some process variables. I already have my customer table over here available, and I have my order table, which was a child table. I can also add additional data sources if I wanted. So I can go over here and start adding additional data sources. So for example, if I wanted to bring in a secondary data source for SharePoint, I can do that. I can select connect to SharePoint with an access token created by my IT. There's a root site in SharePoint, and in that root site there is a library called customer order, and I can say auto save data in SharePoint. So I can specify those kind of sync rules. However, I'm going to cancel out this one. I'm going to show how you can add external data sources on the fly. Now, before I start designing the application, one of the first things you will notice is the extent of integration provided by AgilePoint. AgilePoint integrates with more than 70 plus line of business systems with more than 700 plus process actions which are available out of the box. So all the common ones you can think of: Microsoft, Amazon, RPA products like Blue Prism, UiPath, Power Automate, document repositories like Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, various database providers, digital signature providers, blockchain providers are listed over here, machine learning, the cognitive services, CRM providers like Salesforce and Microsoft, SAP. So if I drill down into one of them, for example, Salesforce. Typically, when a vendor says they do an integration with a system, they do very lightweight integration, create, update, delete, retrieve. They have 4 activities. AgilePoint goes pretty deep into each one of them. So if you see, we have activities for, say, add an attachment or change an ownership. We have studied these systems in detail, and we know that something like an add an attachment or change an ownership cannot be done by just an update API, right? So we provide you specialized building blocks for these things as well. Now, for today's demo, my process starts with a human activity. So I'm going to drag and drop a start task activity. Going to add a new form. I'm going to call it submit. Click next. Right now, the only option available is blank form. You'll see how this changes later on in my demo. Now I'm on the second core pillar of AgilePoint. So first core pillar was integration. Second core pillar is forms. So it is a WYSIWYG form designer. It is going to ask me if I want to set up any form level settings like label positioning, tab orders. If I want to change the font style, set background images, any buttons I want to enable. So I'm going to say enable print and save as in PDF button, put the buttons on the right hand bottom corner. I can enable multiple languages on the form, in which case it would have shown me a translation editor. I'm going to go with this for now. I'm going to click on columns. It is a 3-column right now form. I'm going to convert it into a 2-column form. And because I have a lengthier form, I'm going to break it down into sections. So the first section is going to be called customer details. Second one would be location. Third one would be order history. And the fourth one would be payment details. I can specify my visibility rules for these sections. It can be dynamic. I'm going to go with default for now. I can specify whether I can jump from first tab to third tab or I have to go in a sequence. I can pick the navigation bar style, so it can be chevron based, block style, line style, where the navigation bar would be put, where the next and previous buttons would appear, colors. I'm going to just go with default for now. So it now has 4 sections. Now before I start designing a form, let's look at the number of controls which are available. Typically, a form designer has around 30-35 controls. AgilePoint provides 70 plus controls available out of the box. So if you can see over here, all the common ones are listed in the common controls area, which is text box, text area, radio buttons, checkbox, drop down, file upload, rich text editor, number boxes, those kind of things. If I go to the advanced one, it shows me the ones with pre-built regular expression checks like phone, email, postal code, social security, the advanced ones over here, right? Like data grid, star ratings, captchas, drawing control, people picker, maps, geolocation, and then VOEM Telerik as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop an auto suggest control, which is a type ahead control. I'm going to call it customer name. I'm going to make this mandatory. And I'm going to say, as I'm typing in a customer name, if a matching customer name is found, pre-populated. So I'm going to bind it to a lookup, enable sorting over here. I'm going to create my first lookup. Now, just like process on the form level as well, AgilePoint does integrate with a lot of different systems. I'm going to use data entity for initial part of my demo. I'm going to call it get customers. This will be a name value pair. Show me only customer entities. There is an entity called customer, and I'm interested in a field called customer name for both name and value. Looks good. I don't need any where clause. I want to bring down all customers right now. I'm going to do a quick preview. I can preview in various device types. So I'm going to preview it in PC browser for now. Remember, I have a customer called John Smith. If I type J, it shows up. So my integration is working. Now I dragged and dropped the control from here. Now my requirement is that as soon as I submit the form, the data from customer should be updated in the customer table. So I'm going to specify my data binding. So here is my data source. I'm going to drag and drop that on top of this control, and it did the data binding. Now you can see there's an icon for data binding. So now you saw me drag and drop a control from here and then bind it. I can do it much easier. So I can just drag and drop from here, and AgilePoint intelligently will suggest the best available control for that data type. So it suggested email control in this case. In this case, it is going to suggest a phone control. I'm going to just change it to phone number dialed in US. Age would be a number box. Address would be a text area. Now address tends to be lengthier, so I'm going to span it across multiple columns and adjust the width. I don't need to write any lengthy CSS for this kind of a thing. Then I'm going to drag and drop city, state. I'm going to put a couple of internal fields as well, ID and customer ID. Now for customer ID, it said it could not figure out the best available control, so it shows me all the compatible controls. So I'm going to pick number box. Because these are internal fields, I'm going to say mark them as invisible, so it doesn't show to the end user. Now one of my requirements is that if I select an existing customer, I don't want rest of the fields to be manually entered. It should be automatically populated. So I'm going to put an auto lookup control over here. I'm going to say this is called get customer details. Define my second lookup. This is going to go against data entity. This will be multiple column. I'm going to go against customer table to get additional information, and I'm going to specify my binding. I'm going to say I want ID field to be mapped to the ID field on my form. Remember, this binding is different from the binding I just now did. That binding was more for when I submit the form, where would the data go and reside. This one is telling me if external lookup is executing, which controls would it feed the data in to. So I'm going to say I need ID, I need customer ID, map customer ID to customer ID. I want email, phone, and age. So I'll map email to email, phone to phone, age to age over here, and then I'll map address, city, and state. I'll map address to address, city to city, and last I'll map state to state. Now which customers information are we trying to look up? So I'm going to specify my first filter condition over here, and I'll say where customer name matches the customer name I'm selected in the first control on the form. Click finish. Now I have precise control over when this lookup would get triggered. So I can say only trigger when a specific field value changes or a related field value changes. So whenever the customer name changes, then only trigger it. So it is good for form performance perspective. I'm going to quickly preview the form again. Type John Smith. Once I tab out of it, immediately rest of the form is populated. So great, my integration is working. I'm going to go to location and add few more controls. So I'm going to add a map control. Going to bind it to Google Map, and I'm going to give it a zoom level of 6. I'm going to also add a geolocation control to capture customers' location or coordinates. I'm going to say that auto capture customer's location as soon as he moves within 100 meters of his current position, and feed it to a map. Next, I'm going to go to order history. Now you saw me on the customer detail, I did a data binding. I'm using different sync policies within my application. So the first tab, customer information, I wanted it to be automatically synchronized as soon as the form is submitted. Order history is something which is read only. If I wanted it to be synchronized, I would have just dragged and dropped from here, and I would have selected a control like data grid or subform and did a data binding. But I don't want this to be synchronized, so I want a no sync policy in this case. I'm going to just go and search for data grid control over here. I'm going to call it order history. Now I could have gone over here and just bound it from here itself using a lookup, but I'm going to show you that you can feed values from one control into another as well. So I'm going to first span it across two columns because data grid would have more columns. And then I'm going to add an auto lookup over here. I'm going to say this is get orders. Define my another lookup, data entity. This will be multiple column lookup. Now this time I'm going to go against the order table. It shows me a lot of columns. I'm not interested in all of them. All I'm interested in is 5 columns: order date, quantity, unit price, product, and total. I can rename these. I'm going to leave it as is for now. And I'm going to specify my filter condition. Which customer's order am I going to retrieve? So I'm going to say where customer ID matches the customer ID on my first tab. And click finish. And what I want is whatever results it returns back, bind it to the grid and trigger this only when I select a customer from a performance perspective. So I'm going to do a preview again. Remember, John Smith has an order, so it captures my coordinates, and John Smith has one order. So great, the integration seems to be working. Going to complete rest of the form. Now I'm going to start bringing some external integration. So I'm going to drag and drop a drop down control, call it products. My product catalog is maintained in SharePoint, so I'm going to say lookup data against an external system, enable sorting. Next time I'm going to select SharePoint as the data source. So connect to SharePoint, let's call it get products, and this will be a name value pair because it's a drop down. I'll connect to the root site within SharePoint. There's a list called products, which I showed you earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and test this query. I can specify my where clauses. I can just, in my case, I want all records to come back. It returns back the results, so I'm going to go ahead and click finish. Now if you see customer, I did an immediate sync policy over here. Order history I said never sync because it's read only. For order, the new order, I want a deferred sync because I want it to be inserted into the table only when the payment has been authorized. So I'm going to show the third kind of a sync. So I'm not doing any kind of a binding. I'm going to do a deferred insertion of this in the order table. I'm going to add few more controls real quick over here. I'm going to add a date control to capture order date. I'll default it to current date. A number box to capture quantity. Currency control for unit price. Now I could have looked up unit price from the external system, my product catalog, but I'm going to just type in manually. You have seen me do enough lookups for now. And I want the order total to be automatically calculated. So I'm going to put a formula field over here. I'm going to call it this, and I'm going to specify my formula. So it provides you a formula builder. I have various methods and functions available over here. My formula is quite simple. It could be quantity into unit price. You can quickly validate it, and if everything looks okay, click OK. Last, I'm going to add a credit card control, and I'll call it payment information. Now this is an example of a composite control. I could have created credit card section using 10 or 15 text boxes, but AgilePoint provides you all these utility controls as well. I'm going to say I support these two credit cards, show on the billing address over here, and span it across two columns. So this looks good. I'm going to define one rule over here. I'm going to say that if unit price, it brings up the rule builder in this case, and it triggers this rule whenever the value changes. So I'm going to say if unit price is blank, don't show me the amount control. It makes no sense in that case, right? And trigger this rule when on the form load as well. Now I can create extremely complex rules, nested rules, chain rules, multiple rules to trigger when the control value changes. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK and test this form. So this looks good. This looks good. It brings down one record as well. Amount is not shown over here. Product catalog is coming back. And I'm going to say, I'm going to order 4 chairs, $40 each, and this is now 160. So my form logic seems to be working. One more thing you will see over here is, if you wanted to analyze the performance of your form, you can click on Analyze button. You can see a form performance analyzer, and you can drill down into things like how much time the various lookups are taking. So SharePoint lookup seems to be taking a little bit more time compared to others. How much time is it taking to render various controls? So you get a complete visibility. There's a basic mode and an advanced mode. Basic mode is more for citizen developers. Advanced mode is more for pro developers to troubleshoot the form performance if they want it. So this looks good. I'm going to just do a save and check in, but before I do that, some of the miscellaneous items I wanted to cover over here is, if you're a professional developer, you can always take control over the form styling and upload your own CSS over here. If you wanted to really take control of the form behavior, you can use the JavaScript injector to inject your own scripting to override the default form behavior and have your own behavior injected in there. At the same time, you could see that I could preview my form, how it would look like in tablet or phone or various formats. There is a rule builder. I showed you the control level rule builder, but at the same time, there's a rule builder which is available at the various form events as well, like form load before submit, validation on submit. So I can define rules over there, and that is one of the primary reasons I don't have to write code with AgilePoint. In today's demo, I'm not going to write a single line of code actually. And while I'm designing the form in the PC browser, my tablet layout, both portrait and landscape, and my phone layout is getting defined as well. And I have complete control over it. So I can say for example, move email on top of customer name, right? So I can rearrange it as well. I'm going to go back and say save and check in. So that was the second core pillar. Now we are back to the third core pillar, which is the process designer. So we are going to start designing rest of our process, and I'm going to say enable this for offline access as well. So people can submit it offline. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. Now you saw me design my data source. There are some controls on forms, some coming from my data source over here. Now, oftentimes there is a need that at a process level, if you are doing some calculations, you want to define some temporary variables. So I'm going to define 4 temporary variables. One for capturing order ID. These are things which I'm not going to show on my UI. Payment ID. Status, and risk level. So looks good. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm going to minimize this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building some of the integration capabilities. Now I'm going to authorize this payment. Now if I was a business user who did not know how to do that, I can always use a comment feature over here. I can say need help configuring PayPal, and I can tag my developer, the user called developer. In this case I created a user, if you remember, and click submit, and that user would have received an email over here that somebody is trying to ask for a help. So you can see an email is sent out with the comment to this user. In my case, I do know how to configure PayPal, so I'm going to actually go in and say, go to PayPal, drag and drop this activity. I'm going to call it authorize payment. Connect to PayPal using a token which my IT has imported earlier, if you remember. And till now you saw me do a lot of manual mapping. I can just hit the auto map button and it would have intelligently mapped all the matching control names and map them. And I'll say PayPal returns me back a whole lot of nodes. I'm only interested in specific ones. I'm interested in just capturing the payment ID and payment status in this case. So that's it. I'm done without having to know anything about the PayPal API. Next, I'm going to drag and drop a condition shape over here. Going to say check authorization. I'm going to define two paths to this, if it is authorized or not. And I'm going to define my rule. I'm going to say if status coming back from PayPal is equal to authorized, and just for the sake of it, I'm going to make it a little bit more complex so that you can see that you can have complex rules. I'm going to say this person is not a minor. So I'm going to say if age is greater than, say, 21 years, then go for straight through processing. So I'll complete the happy path in this case. What I'm going to do is, if the payment is authorized, now it's the time to insert the record. So I'm going to drag and drop a create record activity from my data entity stencil. I'm going to say this is called create order. Connect and look for custom entity called order management. Specify the mapping. Again, it has a lot of nodes. I don't want all of these. All I'm interested in is map product to product, order date to order date, quantity to quantity, unit price to unit price, and total to total. And which customer's order? So I'm going to map the customer ID as well. And once the order is created, it auto generates an order ID, which I'm going to store in the local variable I create. That's it. I'm done with this. Next, I'm going to go back to the common stencil and drag and drop an email activity over here. And we'll send an order confirmation. You can define global email templates and share it across applications. I'm going to define one locally. In this case, I'll call it order confirmation. Email should be sent to the person whose name is or email is in the data source. And the text of the email would be your order has been processed. This is a dynamic email builder, so I can say, dear customer, your order has been processed, order ID. Remember, I stored the order ID just a minute back, so I'm going to drag and drop this. Now you see this as a textual email. Later on, I'll show you more of an HTML email as well. You can create email templates in multiple languages, so it can be sent to users in a language of their choice as set in their profile. So happy path is complete. Now I'm going to complete the escalation path. I'm going to connect these two. I'm going to go back to the human area, and I'm going to create a human task for escalation if the transaction fails. I'll call it resolution. I'm going to add a new form called resolution in this case. Now you see I have an additional option. I can base it off an existing form. I'll use existing form as my starting point. So I spent all the time designing my first form, but now it will just copy over the entire structure of the first form for me. I can always go to bulk edit and say mark fields as read only or remove some fields. Now I'm going to just keep it as is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new section called approval. And I'm going to make this the default section so that it loads as the default section when this form is loaded. I'm going to complete it. I'm going to drag and drop a couple of labels over here. And I'm going to show the risk level value, which is stored in a process field called risk level. I'm going to bring this later on in my demo using a machine learning service. And because it is that important, I'm going to set the font size to 20. This should be appearing in bold and in red color. Next, if I want to approve or reject this thing, I'm going to call this approval decision. It's a yes no radio button. This will be required, and I'm going to stack these radio buttons horizontally. Now often approval forms has some kind of comments, so I'm going to drag and drop a comments history control. Again, a utility control. It will show you the entire audit trail of the comments which have been put. And you might want to upload some kind of a documentary proof, so I'm going to upload a file upload control over here as well. I'm going to call it proof. I'm going to connect to an external document repository. AgilePoint does support a whole lot of document repositories, all of them listed over here. I'm going to pick SharePoint today. Connect to SharePoint using the access token. There's a root site in here. It discovers the document libraries. There's a document library called customer order. It discovers the structure. I'm going to say store these documents in the root site. And here is how I want you to handle duplicates. Either overwrite the file or auto increment the file name. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. You can also specify what actions user can take on the file upload, whether he can just upload file, view upload, or download file. I'll give him all the options. You can further restrict it down based on extension. So you can say he can only upload PDF, how many files he can upload, what is the maximum size. So all those properties can be set. I'm going to just go with default. However, I'm going to do one small rule over here. I'm going to say if approval decision is equal to no, set the comments as mandatory, else it is not mandatory. So let's go ahead and check this. I'm going to open it in preview window. So right now it is no and it is mandatory. If I set it to yes, the mandatory condition is gone. So the form is working. I'm going to go ahead and say save and check in. I'll call this step on the process level resolution, and also enable this for offline access. Previously it was the submit form. Now I'm enabling task form for offline access as well. Next, it asked me who is going to participate on this step. Who is this task going to be assigned to? I can assign it to a role or a group, or it can be a variable coming from my form or model data or data source, or it can be a pre-built system token as well. So I'm going to drag and drop process initiator, and I'm going to say whoever initiated this process, assign it to his manager maybe, right? For sake of convenience, I'm going to leave it to process initiator so that I don't have to log in and log out today while doing the demo. Next, I'm going to drag and drop a condition activity to check if this was approved. So I'll say check approval, add two rules, approved, rejected, and define my rule. So I'll say go to form, there's a note called approval decision. Check if it has been set to true. If it is true, that means it has been approved. Click finish. Now if it is approved, I still want it to go through the order creation, so I'm going to remap it. And if it is rejected, I'm going to map it to the stop. I could have sent an email over here as well, but you have already seen me do an email, so I'm going to leave that part. Now I'm also going to bring in some machine learning as well. So I'm going to say if this is a high risk transaction, I want some of the processing to be bypassed. So I'm going to go over here and go to machine learning over here. I'm going to drag and drop machine learning activity. So one thing you will see is I'm not connecting it to as part of my process. It is sitting somewhere outside. So think of it as a governing activity. It is governing the execution of your process. So mine is a smaller process in this case, but imagine if it was a 50-step process based on the results coming back from machine learning, you could have said move from step number 3 to step number 47 directly. Yeah, I could have done this as part of adding a lot of conditions as part of my process, but then that would have made the whole process very difficult to manage. So the governing activity makes it a lot easier. This is something unique to AgilePoint. I'm going to say check risk, add a new listener. I can add multiple of these as well. Connect to AWS. There are machine learning models available. I'm going to say I want to do credit risk analysis, and I have control over when this is going to be triggered. So I'm going to say trigger it when authorized payment activity is done. Specify a mapping. So pass in some data to this. I'm going to pass in credit card type, customer's age, city, his demographic information basically, and state, and it will tell me if it is a high risk transaction or not. It sets me back some response. I'm interested in predicted label, which I'm going to store in the risk level variable. And I want to do some dynamic routing, so I'm going to say enable change flow. The rule would be if risk level is equal to high, then directly jump to resolution step, else go to check authorization. Click save, finish. I'm going to quickly validate my process model just to see if everything is correct. It checks against the list of validation rules. It says process model validated successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and do a save and check-in. And I'll publish this process model. Now, as I mentioned, AgilePoint comes with built-in version control. So it is asking me to check in all the checked out files. It supports check-in, check-out, labeling, milestone, those kind of things. And I'll go with version number 1. I can put a note if I wanted. I can set notify people that a new application is available. I can set permissions over here as well. If you remember, I set up initially permission for app designer and app owner. I can add additional permissions for initiator, report viewers. I'm going to go with default for now. Now, typically, I could have gone to Work Center at this point of time and consume my application from there. So if I go to my apps, the app is listed over here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how you can completely rebrand the user experience of the portal. So you saw the 3 core pillars: integration, forms, and process. Now you're looking at the 4th core pillar. You can create portal experiences. So I'm going to go to page builder. If I do add a page, I can add a page real quick over here. I can add a row, I can add columns, I can add widgets. It provides me various widgets out of the box: buttons, forms, headings, hyperlinks, rich text editors, right? Various card layouts, media layouts, audio, video card layouts. I can embed reports in here. But one of those widgets, if you see, is eForm. Think of it as unlimited widgets because you can create any sort of widget using our eForm widget control. So think of if your announcements are stored in SAP, you can create an announcement list kind of a control widget using the eForm builder. Now, in interest of time, I'm going to actually go out of this one. I'm going to import a page, which I have already created. I'm going to check this in with the import and check-in. It does some validation. This process might take 10-15 seconds. It is done now. So you see there is a page over here. I can publish it and set it as a home page. I can create team specific pages as well, so that if HR is looking at this page, only HR can access that page. I can set up that kind of security using the permissions framework. So as I mentioned, layered security over here. I'm going to do a quick preview. So as you can see, it completely changed the menu style for me, right? So the entire AgilePoint menu is gone. I have my custom menu. AgilePoint menu got collapsed in one single category. It has a image carousel, buttons, other images, launching blocks. I'm going to click on one of them. Now first demo run, I'm going to enter a customer which does not exist. Capture his location. Because he does not exist, there's no order. I'm going to order 4 chairs, $40 each. So it's $160. I'm going to put a credit card. In this case, I'm going to put a test credit card number. And once this data is filled, I'm going to go ahead and click submit. Okay, now I'm going to go to Manage Center real quick. As an application owner, I can always check how my applications are running. I'm going to go to Runtime Management, Processes, look for the COM application, and I'll say, show me all the instances of this application. So you see this is already completed. If I drill down, I see a complete audit history of this thing. I can see how the process looked at runtime. So it went through the straight through processing. In this case, it was a low risk transaction, so went through straight through processing. If I go to audit trail, I can see entire system based audit trail, a human audit trail, an event log audit trail. I can see the data in there as well, and if there is parent-child process, I can see the process hierarchy. So it looks good. I'm going to go back to the app builder at this point of time. And if I go to data entity, and if I look at the customer table, go to data, I can see the new record is inserted over here. So the logic seems to work. I'm going to go to app builder again. And I'm going to start bringing in some changes. So I'm going to import a child application, which I've already created for collecting customer feedback. Now it has a built-in dependency checker. So it does a dependency check that all the things this application is dependent on is available. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, everything looks good. I'm going to select this one. And there is a process model called customer feedback. Now what this process model is doing is it is invoking an RPA job. I'm using UiPath in this case, but we support other RPA providers as well. And it's providing all that information and feeding this into UiPath. Next step is an interesting step. I want to collect feedback from customers, but remember, customer is not registered within my system. He is working anonymously. So this is an anonymous task which you can use to interact with people who are not registered within your organization. I'm going to double click this one, go to anonymous access. I'm going to actually set it up from scratch in front of you. I'm going to say new feedback is the name, select the token, what user I want to use to make any kind of system calls. I'm going to say here is my user, validate the user. So now the credentials are okay. Click update. It lets me control, though this is anonymous, it lets me control a lot of security. I can set up my firewall rules and restrict it to certain IP addresses. I can say restrict what kind of calls are or APIs are being made on this form, because remember it is running outside my organization boundary, so I can have complete control. And though this is anonymous, I can still enable multi-factor authentication. So what it would do is it would mail a 8-digit code to the user which he has to enter before the form opens. Typically probably not something I would have done for a customer form, but what if I am asking customer to upload some documents or something? I'm going to still enable it just to show you the demo. I'm going to put my email ID in here and click generate. Click, if you see there is a variable in here, I'm going to go ahead and click copy this one and click save. So this URL would be different for different instances. I'm going to go back to my email, put it in edit mode. Now this one is an HTML drafted email with a table in here and a link. Using HTML editor, I'm going to just go ahead and change the link to the new link and click OK. Click finish. Next, it is doing some sentiment analysis. So it takes customers' comments, runs it past a sentiment analysis service and see if the sentiment score is less than 70%. It brings in customer service department to see why customer was unhappy. And at the end, the uploaded document is archived. I'm going to go ahead and click save and check in. Publish. I'm going to check in the rest of the pending files and give it a version number and click publish. I'm going to go with default permission. Next, I'm going to go back to my original application. I'm going to make a couple of changes over here. The first change I want to do is I want to change the form a little bit. Going to go to payment detail and I'm going to add a number box. So I'm going to bring in some real-time inventory check. I'm going to call this one available units. Its default value would be 0 and by default it would probably be read only. I don't want users to be entering data for this. Similarly, I'm going to add a label over here which will be conditionally shown. I'm going to call it out of stock. Again, this is important, so I'm going to mark it as 20 and show it in red color. Now I want this inventory to be fetched from Salesforce in this case, so I'm going to add a lookup, my second external integration. I'm going to call it get inventory. Go to configure. This time I'm going to select Salesforce as my lookup source. Click next. Connect to Salesforce using my access token which I created earlier in the demo. We'll call it get inventory. This will be a multiple column type lookup. And now Salesforce has a lot of entities in there. The entity I am interested in is called product inventory. There's a lot of columns in there. I'm only interested in one column out of this one, which is available unit. I'm going to select that one and map it to available unit field on my form. Also for the filter condition, I'm going to add a filter and I'm going to say which products inventory where name equal to name of the product, and click finish. I'm going to again say trigger this only when a related field value changes, and I'm going to make a couple of other changes. Now remember, I had a rule on the unit price. I'm going to remove that because now I have some more controls, and I'm going to define a rule on available units. So I'm going to say if available unit is equal to 0, that means the product is out of stock. I'm going to hide certain controls like quantity, unit price, amount, payment information, and I'm going to show control out of stock. I'm going to execute it on form load as well. So now let's go and check our form behavior. So I'm going to go to form details over here. So you can see the rest of the form is all hidden. If I select chairs, it shows me quantity, unit price, amount, and rest of the fields. And if you remember, I showed earlier that entertainment center has no inventory, so it shows me out of stock. So the form logic seems to work. I'm going to go ahead and do save and check in. Now I'm going to also go to common stencil again and bring in a sub-process activity at the end to initiate the customer feedback. I'm going to say look for an application which is defined in other application, a sub-process defined in other application. Here is the sub-process. Looks good. Use the latest version. If I wanted to change any naming convention, I can do that. I'm going to go with default. And how do I want to share data between the parent and child? Now this application might be belonging to another department, so I don't want to share everything. I'm going to map only specific attributes. From a data privacy perspective, I'm going to map order ID, address, age, city, customer ID, customer name, email, phone, state, and there are just few more controls I want to bind from my forms. I also want to mail out some product information, so I'm going to map those as well. Quantity to quantity, unit price to unit price, total to total. And remember, in my form fields, I also had a document which was uploaded, and I want this process to be archiving that document, so I'm going to map the file name over here. I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. I'll quickly validate this again. Click save and check in and publish this new version of the application. Going to check in rest of the files, give it a new version number, click publish, close this out. Now this time I'm going to go to Work Center and I'm going to consume it from there. Now because this was a new environment, everything looks pretty blank over here. So what I'm going to do is just to give you a 1-minute overview of how the Work Center looks like. I'm going to switch to a different environment where I have a few more tasks. So this is a case management kind of a dashboard for you. So it shows you how many tasks are overdue, pending, assigned, a calendar view of that as well. I can plan my day. I can add more things to the, what I want to work on today. I can put certain cases on watch list, my frequently used applications, my recent tasks, recent requests. If I go to the inbox over here, it shows me a card based or a bucket based layout over here. I can always drag and drop these activities. I can take assignment of a task, for example, or put it back into the pool this way. If I'm one of those users who still wants to work based on the grid, the old style task list, I can do that as well. Also, it shows you various views. So my task shows any tasks which are assigned to me. Direct team shows tasks which are assigned to as a manager. I can have a visibility into my team's work, my department's work. As an app owner, I can see how the various instances of my app is progressing. Similarly, if I go to process, shows me a bucketed list of processes which are running as well. Similarly, if I go to delegations, I can set up delegation, my vacation schedule. If I go to statistics over here, shows me how I'm using these applications. If I turn to January, shows me which day, how many instances I kicked off. Same for task and processes. And again, there are various views for this, right? I can see my processes, my team's processes as a manager, my department's processes, statistics. So I have a complete visibility as a manager in this case. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to my own demo environment. In this case, if I scroll down, there's a app over here. I'm going to click on it, and this time I'm going to select John Smith, an existing customer. It pre-populates this. There's the location, there is order history. If I go to payments tab, I'm going to say put an order for 4 chairs. It is a Visa card I'm going to use in this case. And it provide the expiration date, the CVV number, and go ahead and click submit. Now if I go back to the work center, in this case, go to inbox, processes. You see there is a process running. I can take certain actions on it. I can bring up the runtime visualizer. I can see a read-only view of the form. I'm going to open a runtime visualizer in this case. And you can see the process is executing, but something strange is happening over here, right? It came to this step, didn't go to this, and directly jumped to the resolution step. Now this is something, if you see, is being done by this governing shape. Now this was a simpler example, but imagine if it was a 50-step process and based on AI machine learning input, you wanted to jump from step number 3 to 47. So it can do all that kind of a thing as well. Now why it jumped to this step? So let's go to our tasks. Remember, I made myself the participant of each of the task steps. It has a lot of context sensitive actions, so I can take reassign tasks, create rework for other people, create ad hoc tasks on this case, add it to watch list. I'm going to just open this one. And it is assigned to me because it is a high risk transaction. I'm going to still go ahead and approve it. Add a comment, upload a file. Since I didn't put any check, I'm going to just upload this one. The file is still getting uploaded. It is telling me it got uploaded. I'm going to go ahead and click submit. Okay, if I go back to the process viewer, the process should move forward. It is a runtime visualizer, so it moved forward, it inserted the record, and it is now on the customer feedback section. So if I drill down into the sub-process, you can see RPA job has been invoked. So I'm going to go to UiPath console in this case and start this one. And what it is doing is it took that data from AgilePoint form, passed it on to UiPath, and UiPath invoked the WinForm application and is now feeding all this information into that legacy system. I'm going to stop this one. Next, it sent out an email for customer feedback. So if I go back to my email, I have received an email. I'm going to copy this link over and go to a private browser window and paste it. Now remember, I enabled two-factor authentication in it. So it's saying that before you open the form, I've mailed out a 6-digit code to you, or 8-digit code to you. So I've received this. Going to enter this, click submit, and that's when it opens the form. So I can have that level of security even if I'm dealing with external users. assuming they were uploading document kind of things. I'm going to give it a very bad rating so that sentiment analysis comes in. I'm using a word terrible over here in the comments. Now if I switch back to my process viewer, within the next few seconds you will see that the sentiment analysis service kicks in and it assigns the task to the customer service. Now I can complete it and it will go for archiving. I'm going to leave this part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get into my work center. I'm going to open my already running request and clone this one. I don't have to re-enter the whole data. I'm going to just quickly clone this one using the clone feature. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the mobile features in this case. Before I go and do that, I'm going to go to my settings area. Instead of my users entering URLs and authentication types, I'm going to generate a QR code for them with all the settings I wanted at an organization level. And as a user, if I go to the user profile, it has the QR code in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to project the screen of my mobile on the screen. So now you can see my phone being mirrored on the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the AgilePoint app over here. I'm going to click on configure. I'm going to scan the QR code instead of manually configuring the whole thing. And I'm going to log in with the same user. I'm going to sign in. I'll not save the password except the EULA. I can go through some quick start instructions. I'm going to skip this. I can plan for the day from here as well. I'll quickly bring up the application from frequently used applications. So as you can see, it is asking me to permission to use location, and it is the same form. If I pick John Smith, it pre-populates the thing. If I go to location, it supports both both portrait as well as landscape, so you can see the whole order history, payment details, the same products listed over here. I'm going to go back to the home screen. Now it also provides you some of the other things as well. So for example, I can go to my apps over here, and you see there is an orange icon over here. It is telling me that this app is enabled for offline access, and if I wanted to download it to be taken offline. So I'm going to click on it. Now the icon turns green. That means it is available for offline access. Similarly, on the task list, if you see there are two tasks right now, resolution and call customer. And there is an icon on one of them that this can be taken offline. I'm going to click on it again. Now I can obviously swipe on these tasks and take various actions like say view process right within my form. The same thing which I was showing you, but now it is available for offline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the home screen over here. I'm going to run the app in offline mode. If I go to my task list now, you see there is only one task because only one task is available for offline. I'm going to open it. I'll just quickly approve this thing from here. Now if I go back to my outbox, there is one task sitting over there in the outbox. What I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the offline mode. So now I'm again back online. Now just for the sake of time, it would auto sync in a few minutes, but I'm going to just sync it now itself. So it's gone and now my process moves forward. Similarly, there are other views in this as well. So you can see processes I started, processes I worked on. I can maintain my delegations over here. I can also manage my team's view over here. So you can see how my team members are. If I'm a manager, I can manage some of the things as well. Now, moving on from mobile, the other thing I wanted to touch upon mobile is that AgilePoint has some special capabilities around custom branded mobile applications. AgilePoint's app is listed in Android as well as Apple Store. However, it is very difficult for a company having hundreds of thousands of users to go to each one of them and tell go to the App Store and download an app called AgilePoint. So we do let you create your own custom branded mobile apps using a component called Mobile App Accelerator. You can get in over here, go to My Apps. I've already created some of them, so I'm going to put in an edit mode. You can give your own app name, your own app version, your own copyrights. Just like I did with QR code thing, you can set up URLs and all the configuration over here. You can say, show me all mobile enabled apps under one single app, or create specific ones for say HR or finance. You can configure your menu options, rename them, hide or show them. You can target your app for various platforms. You can create device specific bills. You can create public store bills. You can create MDM bills, private store bills, sign it with your own certificates for Android and iOS. You can provide your own app styling. You can upload your own images so you don't see AgilePoint logos. You can see your own company logos. So again, with point and click, you can create your own branded mobile app. So you can click build and it gives you the download package. So that was more about mobile. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about reporting as well. So I'm going to go over here to another environment where I've run this application few times so that I have enough data for reporting. Now this is one major area of investment for AgilePoint in V8. We totally revamped the dashboarding capabilities under Analytics Center. I'm going to first create a simple report, and then I'm going to talk about some of the out-of-the-box reports as well. So I'm going to go and say create a report. It shows me what data sources are available for my role. I'm going to say there's a table called customer order. Now you can create a join between multiple tables even if it was not defined at a database level. So you can define a totally hybrid data source if you had permissions to do so. For first demo, I'm going to keep it simple. Customer table, go to designer, minimize this a little bit. I'm going to add a chart. I'll call it by status. I'm going to put the name over here. And on the x-axis, what I want to see is request status variable. And on the y-axis, I want to see the count of number of process instances. But right now it is set up as a line chart, which I don't like. So I'm going to go ahead and change the chart type. There are a lot of other chart types which are available as well. Line, column, bar, area chart, pie chart, funnel chart, down charts, combination, tree map, heat map, bubble charts, scatter maps. I'm going to select pie chart. Looks a lot better, but I want to change some look and feel. So I'm going to add a border, for example. I want to change the theme. So I'm going to pick another theme which is consistent with the rest of my environment. I'm going to say put a legend on the right hand bottom corner. So now you see a legend over here. Show percentage values, show slice labels. So now it shows me a precise value. I like a more ring style pie. So I'm going to change it to ring style over here, and don't use pagination in this case. So this looks good. I'm going to put it back in configure mode. I'm going to add my second report part. Again, I'm going to minimize this a little bit. I'm going to add a new chart. This time I'm going to add maybe something like a tree map. Right? I'm going to say distribution by products. Is the title, and I'm going to show distribution of items and their count over here. So looks good. Now what I want to do is, again, I'm going to add a border. I'm going to give it a theme. I want it to be multicolored so that I can easily read it. And I'm going to add some value labels and slice labels so I can see that dining table is my most sold product in this case, and disable pagination. Now that was more for charts. I can always add grids as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add a grid. There are various report parts available. So I can do charts. I can create form style reports like invoices, gauges, grids, maps. I'm going to go for grid for now. I'm going to call it order details. Now grid supports various formats as well: vertical, horizontal, pivot, drill down. I'm going to just go ahead and use simple grid for now. I'm going to say there are columns called customer name, email, phone, item description, quantity, unit price, and show amount. So the grid is being created as well. I can do more styling if I wanted. I'm going to just go with this one. I'm going to go ahead and click save. I'm going to save it as a report called demo 3 in this case under sample reports. Click OK. Now I can use the report viewer to do a quick preview over here. So you can see there are a lot of options over here. I can subscribe to a report to be automatically emailed to me. I can print a report. I can email it as embedded link, embedded report in the email body or as an attachment. I can export it in various formats, Word, Excel, PDF kind of things. So there's a whole lot of options available. Now I'm going to go back to the list of reports real quick and show you what kind of reports are available. However, before I do that, I just wanted to show one thing, that the Analytics Center has a lot of capabilities. So if you go and click on add a connector over here, it's not just limited to relational databases. It can report against, say, Elasticsearch or Excel, or non-relational databases like MongoDB, Redshift, REST services, Snowflake, Salesforce. You can go and report against those as well. Similarly, if I go to role setup and select a role, it does provide you a persona-based report experience. So if I go to permissions, there's a whole lot of permissions I can control. So for example, if I go to reports, if I select simple, it is going to use the business user persona. He can just see limited set of properties, cannot define custom joins. Whereas if I select advanced, he would be able to set up those advanced joins between hybrid data sources and see a lot more properties. And also you can control what kind of report parts they can use within their reports. I'm going to go back to the list of reports real quick to show you what is available out of the box. There is a lot of analytics and operational intelligence reports like app version, average processing time, process effectiveness, time spent, those kind of reports. There's BAM reports available like outgoing email, user performance statistics kind of reports. We also provide you a lot of sample reports out of the box against AdventureWorks database. We provide reports against Northwind and Wide World import databases as samples. And we provide you some security and compliance reports like how are the access tokens being used, what data entities are being used, groups, role, membership kind of reports are available. So here are some of the examples. So if you see, this is a report which comes out of the box as a sample. You can create drill down style reports. So you can see right now, if I click on this bar, it immediately changes the data shown on other ones as well. So you can create drill down style reports. Here is an example of report with more styling and different chart types. This is the app version history report. So it is showing you how many versions of the apps are there, which quarters they were published in, how are they being used. Here is more of a security report, what access tokens were created, who created it, which applications are using it, kind of thing. So that is more about report, but you can also create dashboards as well. Once you have created these reports, you can surface them in various dashboards. Here is an example of a dashboard I created against Northwind database. It is available as a sample. So it shows from an HR manager perspective, you can see how many employees are there, employees versus contractor, gender distribution, number of employees per department. So you can create these kind of dashboards. You can also have the same kind of scheduling and import-export options, but it also provides you a slideshow view. So you can either run it automatically or manually. You can basically use it as a presentation as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that page which I had created and I'll show you how to embed a report. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say add a new row, add a widget, analytics, report, connect to sample reports, connect to a report called by status, click add. So it starts rendering the report. I can resize this column a little or row a little bit. I can add multiple columns in there. So you can see that I can embed reports as well. So with that, I come to the end of this demo session. Thanks a lot for your time.